If the national debt gets to 40 trillion, right now it's what, almost 32 trillion. So when it gets to 40 trillion in a few years, if interest rates stay at 5% and the whole debt rolls over, and now we got to pay 5% on 40 trillion, that's 2 trillion a year. We're going to get to 1 trillion a year, probably this year. I mean, it's going to be the biggest line item in the budget other than maybe Social Security, Medicare. I mean, we're going to probably pay more in interest than we're paying for national defense. We're certainly going to be paying more for interest than education or welfare combined or a lot of these other things. But eventually, interest is going to be the only thing we're spending money on. The U.S. government is simply going to be conduit from collecting taxes and paying interest, right? There's not going to be anything left for it to do. So obviously, it's going to have to collapse before it gets to that point. And the most likely way it's going to collapse is inflation. Because if inflation is bad enough, let's say there's so much inflation that prices go up 10 times. Everything is 10 times as expensive. Let's say at the end of this decade, something that costs $100 now costs $1,000. Let's say that's what happens. Right? If the national debt is, let's say, 40 trillion or 50 trillion, it will feel like it's only 5 trillion because in relative terms. So that's how you wipe out most of your debt. You can't repay the debt, that's impossible. So you just repudiate it through inflation. You just screw your creditors by paying them back in money that has a lot less value. Because there's the honest way to default, which is we can't pay you back, so we're not going to do it. We're going to give you some kind of haircut. So if you own U.S. Treasuries, we'll give you 50 cents on the dollar or 40 cents on the dollar or something like that. But no politician wants to be honest and admit that we're broke. So instead, they just print a bunch of money and say, hey, everybody gets paid back. Here's all the money you loaned us. Yes, when you loaned us this money, you could have bought a car with it. And when we're paying you back, you can only afford a pack of chewing gum with the same amount of money, but we paid you back, right? We didn't default. Here's your money.
Okay, so you're saying the right way to solve that solution, if you were in charge, what you would do is you would either default or partially default on most of the debt, because that would be the best way to go about it.
If you want to know the right solution to the problem right now, is we let interest rates go way up, let a bunch of companies go bankrupt, let a bunch of businesses fail, free up the capital and their labor to be reallocated. But what the government needs to do is fess up in that environment and say, you know what, we have way too much debt. We can't pay it back. So we're just going to have to give everybody a haircut. And it won't be that bad. I mean, let's say I own U.S. Treasuries, and I used to have $1 million worth of Treasuries, but now I have $500,000 worth of Treasuries. I still could be better off than people that own stocks or real estate. I mean, when I go to buy stocks or real estate, I might be able to buy more stocks and real estate because those prices will actually go down more than my bonds. And the cost of living might go down. Everybody's got to be told the truth that they're going to get less. But since that's not going to happen, it's going to end up being much worse for our creditors. It's going to be much worse for the people on Social Security. They're not going to get their benefits cut. They're going to get paid benefits that buy nothing. And of course, the way I would cut Social Security, the people that need it the most would get the least cuts. And wealthy people would have the most cuts, or they would, like for instance, me, right? I should get no Social Security. I know I paid in a lot, but I should get nothing. But if you just don't default on anybody, then everybody is going to lose through inflation. I'm going to lose the same as a guy that is dependent on his Social Security, which, that's not the best way to do it, is to spread the losses out evenly so that the Warren Buffetts suffer as much as, the truck driver. We got to get rid of Social Security. We got to eliminate it so that future generations aren't dependent on an intergenerational government-run Ponzi scheme. We have to allow the free market to work. We have to get the government out of a lot of things. Get the government out of education. No more student loans. No more guaranteed student loans. Get the government out of housing. No more government guaranteed mortgages. Get it out of banking. No more government-insured bank accounts. We need to go back to a free market. If we want real prosperity, then we need a real free market. We can't have a free market with the government micromanaging everything and distorting all the markets with subsidies and taxes and regulations that make the economy a lot less productive than it otherwise would be. And it forces everybody to accept a much lower standard of living than what they would enjoy if we didn't have all this government.
Okay, so if people want to prepare for inflation, let's go back to an asset that some people think is an inflation hedge and you do not, which is Bitcoin and other cryptos. Why is Bitcoin or any cryptos, why are they not an inflation hedge in your view?
Well, so when you talk about a hedge against inflation, what exactly are you hedging? So during inflation, prices go up. And the price of the things that you need to buy go up. Food, energy, stuff like that. So the way you would hedge against inflation is instead of owning the dollar, which is being inflated, you would own an asset or a commodity that would rise along with the price of everything else, so that in the future you could use that commodity to buy your food. Well, I'm going to buy next year's food today. That's how I'm going to hedge inflation. I'm going to go and buy all the food that I expect to eat next year. I'm going to buy it right now. Except some of the food might rot, might not have a long enough shelf life. You might not have enough room in your house to store a year's worth of groceries. The reason gold's a great inflation hedge is I can go out and buy an ounce of gold or whatever I need, and I can just put that in, in a shoebox somewhere. It's not going to rot. It's not going to decay. And as long as the price of gold rises along with the price of everything else, then I'm hedged somewhat. I'm even. The reason Bitcoin can't be an inflation hedge is because Bitcoin in and of itself isn't a commodity. Gold is a commodity like oil, like wheat or soybeans or copper. Gold is a commodity that has a price, and its price is a function of supply and demand. And what do people use gold for? They use it for jewelry. You can conduct electricity and put it in a chip and make a cell phone, or NASA uses it in aerospace. There's all sorts of demand for gold that set a price. And if you go back and you look historically over the last 10 years, 50 years, 100 years, 1,000 years, you can see a relationship between the price of gold and the price of everything else. Right? And so if all prices are going to go up, well, then why wouldn't gold prices go up? They would. Bitcoin is used for nothing. Right? There is no history beyond 12 years. So you can't say, how much should oil be in Bitcoin? How much should wheat be in Bitcoin? Who the hell knows? But meanwhile, what is the demand for Bitcoin in the real world? There is no demand. All the demand for Bitcoin is simply, I want to buy it because I think it's going to go up. Okay, yeah, it's got speculative demand, but that's the only demand it has. It doesn't have real world actual demand. There's no actual user that is going to be buying Bitcoin. In fact, you got miners that are going to be selling Bitcoin. So there are natural sellers. There's just no natural buyer. And so how could it be a hedge against inflation? The price could be anything. Nobody is buying Bitcoin because they think, well, I think inflation is going to be 6% and I'm expecting 6% gain on my Bitcoin. No, they're expecting Bitcoin to go to the moon. Inflation hedges aren't going to go to the moon. Why would they go to the moon? Not unless everything else goes to the moon. So it doesn't have any of the characteristics that would make it a viable inflation hedge. And again, it's down 75% last year. And inflation was, 8%? So adjusted for inflation, you lost better than 80%. I mean, I can't think of pretty much anything worse than that. So how does that qualify it as being a hedge against anything when it can fall that much in such a short period of time? And in fact, Bitcoin has only been around for about 12, 13 years, and it's had, I don't know how many, 4, 5, 6, whatever, 70, 80% declines during that short period of time. So, I mean, it's anything but stable or safe or conservative. It's not a hedge. It is the ultimate speculation.